The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the penthouse ballroom, and I watched my stepbrother Marcus freeze mid-sentence, his face draining of color as he finally recognized the woman standing before him. "Sophia," his voice cracked. "Is that you?" I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and adjusted the diamond necklace at my throat. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The lie was delicious. Of course I knew him. How could I forget the boy who had made my childhood a living hell, who had mocked my thick glasses daily, who had called me Four Eyes and Blind Rat until I believed that's all I was? But this Marcus, this desperate, sweating Marcus in his ill-fitting rental tux, didn't know me. Without my glasses, without the hunched shoulders and shapeless clothes, without the fear that had clung to me like a second skin, I was a stranger, and that was exactly how I wanted it. "It's me, Marcus Chen, your brother." He laughed nervously, reaching out to grab my arm. My bodyguard stepped forward instantly, and Marcus's hand fell away. I let my gaze drift over him with polite disinterest, the same look someone might give to a particularly persistent street vendor. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. Excuse me." I turned away, my Valentino gown swirling around my legs, and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Behind me, I could hear Marcus sputtering, insisting, making a scene. Security would handle him. They always did. This was my party, after all. My celebration? The launch of Chen Sophia Technologies, the AI company that had just secured $3 billion in Series B funding, making me, at 25, one of the youngest female billionaires in tech history. And Marcus? Marcus was here because his company, the pathetic startup he'd built with my stolen algorithms, was circling the drain, and he'd been shameless enough to crash my event hoping to network. I lifted a hand to my face, a phantom gesture from another lifetime, reaching for glasses that hadn't existed for 7 years. 7 years since I died. 7 years since I came back. 7 years since I decided that Sophia Chen would never be a victim again. The memories of my first life still came in dreams, sharp and cruel as broken glass. I was 7 years old when my father died in a car accident, leaving my mother shattered and vulnerable. She remarried within a year, too quickly, everyone said, but grief makes people desperate for stability. Jonathan Chen was handsome, successful, recently widowed with a son my age. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, it was the beginning of 16 years of systematic torture. Marcus was 9, 2 years older than me, and from the moment we met, he looked at me like I was an insect he couldn't wait to crush. His mother, Margaret, was no better. A cold, calculating woman who saw me as competition for resources that should go entirely to her precious son. My mother, so desperate to make her new marriage work, became willfully blind. Every complaint I made was met with, "You're being dramatic," or "That's just how siblings are," or worst of all, "You need to try harder to be part of this family." So I tried. God, how I tried. I was naturally gifted with technology and mathematics, the kind of child who taught herself to code at 8, who breezed through advanced calculus by 12. But every achievement became ammunition for Marcus's cruelty. "Look at the nerd," he'd sneer, loud enough for his friends to hear as I walked past carrying my programming books. "Can't even see without those Coke bottles on her face." My glasses were thick, yes. I'd been born with severe myopia that worsened every year. They made my eyes look huge and distorted, and I was painfully aware of how they dominated my face. I'd asked my mother, begged her, for contact lenses. "Glasses are more practical," Margaret had interjected smoothly before my mother could answer. "And much cheaper. We can't waste money on vanity when Marcus needs new equipment for his basketball team." Marcus didn't even play basketball well, but his needs always came first. The bullying escalated through middle school and high school. Marcus would accidentally knock my glasses off my face, then step on them. 4 times he did this. 4 times I had to wear broken, taped frames for weeks until my mother could budget for new ones. Margaret always made sure to sigh loudly about the cost. He'd steal my homework and copy it, then claim I'd cheated off him when we got the same answers. His friends would shove me in the hallways. They'd make kissing noises and pretend to be blind, walking with their arms stretched out, crashing into lockers. "Look, I'm Sophia. Where are my ugly glasses? I can't see." At home, it was worse. Marcus would deliberately rearrange furniture so I'd trip. He'd delete my computer files before big projects were due. He'd eat food I'd been saving in the fridge and blame me when it was missing. Small, constant cruelties that added up to a suffocating atmosphere of dread. When I won a full scholarship to MIT at 16, skipping a grade because of my advanced coursework, I thought I was free. I wasn't. "We need you to decline the scholarship," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. Margaret stood behind her, lips pressed into a satisfied line. "Marcus needs help with his college applications, and the business isn't doing well. We need you to work for your stepfather's company for a few years instead." "But MIT, this is my dream. I earned this." "You're being selfish," Margaret snapped. "This family sacrificed for you. Now it's time for you to give back." My mother said nothing. She never said anything that mattered. So I stayed. I worked at Jonathan's struggling software company, writing code, fixing their broken systems, essentially running their entire IT infrastructure for minimum wage while Marcus went to USC on the family dime, a school he'd barely qualified for at a cost 10 times my MIT scholarship. By the time I was 21, I'd developed 3 proprietary algorithms that could revolutionize data processing. I was naive enough to think my work would be valued. Instead, Jonathan and Marcus stole everything. They filed the patents under Marcus's name. They used my code to launch a startup, with Marcus as the genius founder and me as nothing, not even credited. When I confronted them, Jonathan had the gall to look disappointed. "Sophia, you're part of the family. We all share in the family's success. Why are you being so difficult about ownership?" "Those are my algorithms. I spent 3 years developing them." "And you developed them on company time, using company resources," Margaret said coldly. "They belong to the company, which belongs to my husband, which will go to Marcus someday. You should be grateful we're letting you continue to work here." I quit that day, moved out with nothing but my clothes and my laptop. My mother called me ungrateful. Marcus posted on social media about how his crazy stepsister had tried to sabotage his startup out of jealousy. I was 22, broke, blacklisted in the tech community because the Chens had spread rumors about me being unstable and litigious, sleeping on a friend's couch and working at a coffee shop to pay rent. The startup took off. Marcus's face was on magazine covers. "Brilliant young entrepreneur revolutionizes data processing." He gave interviews about his genius algorithms and his vision for the future of AI. He never mentioned my name. I tried to fight back legally, but lawyers cost money I didn't have. The Chens had resources and connections. I had nothing. Depression swallowed me whole. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring. On my 23rd birthday, after watching Marcus accept a 30 under 30 award on television, my algorithms won him that award, my code, my work. I swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills. I wanted it to end. I wanted the humiliation, the betrayal, the crushing weight of being erased from my own story to just stop. And it did. I died on a hospital bed 3 days later, my mother crying crocodile tears beside me while Margaret looked vaguely annoyed by the inconvenience. But death wasn't the end. I woke up gasping, clutching my chest. In a small bedroom I recognized instantly, my childhood room with its faded wallpaper and single small window. My hands. I stared at my hands. They were small, child-sized. I lurched to the mirror on my dresser, and my 7-year-old face stared back at me. Round cheeks, wide eyes made huge by thick glasses. The glasses Marcus would mock for the next 16 years. Had I gone insane in those final moments? Was this hell? Some kind of cruel afterlife? Then I saw the calendar on my wall, the date. 3 weeks after my father's funeral. 6 days before my mother would introduce us to Buthetid, Jonathan and Marcus Chen. I wasn't dead. Or I was dead. But I'd come back. Reborn. Returned. Whatever this was, I had a second chance. And I was going to take it. The first few days were disorienting. I had a child's body but an adult's mind, a 23-year-old consciousness crammed into a 7-year-old brain. It gave me headaches. I'd reach for things and misjudge the length of my arms. My coordination was off, but my memories were sharp and complete. I remembered everything, every cruelty, every theft, every moment of humiliation. And more importantly, I remembered every algorithm I developed, every line of code, every technological breakthrough that Marcus would steal. This time, they belonged to me. They would always belong to me. I couldn't stop my mother from meeting Jonathan. They'd met through a grief support group, and I had no way to prevent that without raising suspicions. But I could prepare. When my mother nervously introduced me to her new friend Jonathan and his son Marcus at a family restaurant, I already knew what was coming. Marcus looked at me with barely concealed disgust. Why does she wear those ugly glasses? In my first life, I'd burst into tears. This time I smiled blandly and said nothing. Let him think I was too stupid or shy to respond. Let him underestimate me. That was the first weapon I'd learned, the power of being underestimated. The wedding happened 6 months later. We moved into the Chen's larger house, and the bullying began exactly as I remembered. But this time, I documented everything. I kept a journal hidden in a lockbox under a loose floorboard in my room. Every incident, every cruel word, every accident. I'd learned from my first life that speaking up did nothing. My mother wouldn't listen, and the Chens were expert gaslighters. But written evidence accumulated over years? That could be useful. I also started building my future. At 7 years old, I opened an email account Marcus would never know about. I learned to code in secret, easy since I already knew how, and started freelancing under a pseudonym. I couldn't access most platforms because of age restrictions, but I found ways. I always found ways. Small programming jobs at first, website fixes, basic automation scripts. I charged cheap, delivered perfect work, and built a reputation. By the time I was 10, I was making more money than my allowance. By 12, I had $10,000 hidden in an online account Marcus couldn't touch. Every dollar I earned went into that secret account. Every scrap of code I wrote was backed up in encrypted cloud storage. Every algorithm I developed was copyrighted under a shell company I'd set up using fake IDs purchased on the dark web. Not exactly legal, but I'd learned that playing by the rules only worked if everyone else did too. And the Chens, they had never played by the rules. I let them think I was the same pathetic victim as before. I hunched my shoulders, flinched when Marcus came near. I let him knock my glasses off, once because refusing would raise questions, and I cried exactly as expected. But I never forgot, and I never forgave. High school was a careful game. I had to maintain my grades. I needed that MIT scholarship again, but I couldn't be too successful or Marcus would feel threatened. I had to be visible enough that my achievements were documented, but not so visible that the Chens would interfere. It was exhausting playing the victim while secretly building an empire. By 16, I had $200,000 in savings and a portfolio of freelance work under 3 different pseudonyms. I'd already started developing the algorithms that would make my fortune, but this time I filed the patents myself, through my shell company, with documentation proving I'd created them years before. When MIT offered me a full scholarship again, I accepted immediately, before my mother could say anything. I'm going, I told her flatly. You can't stop me. Sophia, the family needs you. No, you need me to sacrifice myself so Marcus can succeed. That's not happening. Margaret's eyes flashed with fury. Ungrateful little... I have documentation of 16 years of abuse, I interrupted calmly. Every broken pair of glasses, every stolen meal, every file Marcus deleted, every time Jonathan used my code without credit. I've been building a case since I was 7. If you try to stop me from going to MIT, I'll file for emancipation and take you to court, and I'll win. The silence was deafening. I'd never stood up to them before, not in this life, not in the way that mattered. I'd learned from my first life that emotional appeals didn't work, that crying and begging only made them feel more powerful, but threats? Cold, documented threats? That was a language bullies understood. You wouldn't, my mother whispered. Try me. I left for MIT 3 months later. They didn't stop me. College was freedom. For the first time in 2 lives, I could breathe. I changed my appearance immediately, saving up for LASIK surgery, finally getting rid of the glasses that had defined me for so long. The first time I looked in a mirror with perfect vision and no frames, I cried for an hour. Marcus had called them ugly. He'd made those glasses the symbol of everything wrong with me, everything that made me less than him, and now they were gone. I bought contact lenses too, different colors, experimenting with green and violet and even gold. I cut my hair, lost weight, learned to dress well, carry myself with confidence. The transformation was startling. I'd never realized how much of my ugliness had been about posture and self-hatred rather than actual features. By my sophomore year, I was unrecognizable, and I was building my empire. The algorithms I'd developed were even better this time around, refined by having lived through their first iteration. I knew exactly which applications would be most valuable, which markets to target, which investors to approach. I launched Chen Sophia Technologies the summer after my junior year. My name, my real name, not Marcus's, not hidden behind a pseudonym. Chen Sophia, proudly displayed on every patent, every article of incorporation, every press release. The company took off immediately. Within 6 months, we had major contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Within a year, we were processing data for half the social media platforms on the internet. Within 2 years, we were valued at $500 million. I made sure to give interviews, lots of interviews. I wanted my face everywhere, my name in every tech publication, my story plastered across the business section of every major newspaper. Brilliant MIT dropout revolutionizes AI data processing. Meet Sophia Chen, the 23-year-old changing how we understand information. From nobody to tech titan in 3 years, the Sophia Chen story. I wanted Marcus to see every single one of them. I wanted him to choke on my success. And according to my sources, I'd hired a private investigator to keep tabs on the family. He was. Marcus's startup, built on stolen algorithms from my first life, had launched right on schedule. But this time, those algorithms didn't exist for him to steal. Without my code, he had nothing. He'd tried to recreate my work, of course, spent millions in investor money trying to develop his own data processing solutions. But Marcus wasn't a genius, despite what he'd convinced everyone in my first life. He was a mediocre programmer with a talent for taking credit for other people's work. Without me to steal from, he was failing spectacularly. His company was hemorrhaging money. Investors were getting nervous. And then I filed the lawsuits: patent infringement, trade secret theft, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. I sued Jonathan's old software company, I sued Marcus personally, and I sued Jonathan and Margaret as co-conspirators. But we didn't steal anything, Marcus's lawyer sputtered during the deposition. Chen Sophia Technologies didn't even exist when my client developed his algorithms. No, my lawyer agreed smoothly, but my client held the patents for those algorithms 3 years before your client filed his. We have documentation proving she created and copyrighted the work as a minor while living in the Chen household. We also have evidence that your client had access to her personal computer during that time. The timeline is very clear. It was beautiful. The patents I'd filed at 16 through my shell company, they predated everything Marcus had done. The documentation I'd kept, journals, backed up files, emails, proved beyond doubt that the work was mine. Marcus's lawyers tried to claim the shell company was fraudulent, that a teenager couldn't legally own a corporation. My lawyers countered with emancipation documents I'd filed at 17. I'd gone hus. I threw with it after leaving for MIT, and testimony from the MIT professors who'd seen my work. The case was airtight. I'd spent 7 years building an unbreakable legal fortress. The lawsuits destroyed them. Marcus's company went bankrupt trying to fight it. Jonathan's old software company, which had been struggling anyway, collapsed entirely. And when the judgments came through, $40 million in damages for the theft, plus punitive damages for fraud, the Chens lost everything. Their house, their cars, their savings, all of it liquidated to pay what they owed me. My mother called me, sobbing. "How could you do this to your family?" "They're not my family," I said calmly. "They never were. And this isn't me doing something to them. It's consequences. They stole from me, abused me, and tried to erase me. I'm just taking back what's mine." "But where will we live? Jonathan is sick from the stress, and Marcus—" "That's not my problem." I hung up. I felt nothing. No guilt. No satisfaction. just a cold, calm certainty that justice had been served. But I wasn't done. The party was the final move, the ultimate power play. Chen Sophia Technologies' Series B funding announcement was massive news in the tech world. $3 billion, led by Sequoia and Andreessen Horowitz, making us one of the most valuable AI companies in the country. I was 25, one of the youngest female billionaires in history, and I wanted to celebrate properly. So, I rented the penthouse ballroom at the plaza, invited 500 of the most influential people in tech, fashion, and media, and threw the party of the decade. I also made sure the invitation list was public. I wanted Marcus to know about it. I wanted him to see what I'd become, what he'd lost, what he'd never have. I didn't expect him to actually crash it, but in retrospect, I should have. Desperation makes people do stupid things. My head of security found him trying to sneak in through the service entrance. They brought him to me in a private room off the main ballroom, and I studied him with clinical detachment. He looked terrible. The stress of bankruptcy and public humiliation had aged him. He looked 40 rather than 30. His rental tux was cheap and poorly fitted. His shoes were scuffed. There was a manic desperation in his eyes that might have scared the old Sophia. This Sophia felt nothing but contempt. "Why are you here, Marcus?" "I needed to see you, to talk to you." His voice cracked. "Sophia, please, you're destroying us. The lawsuits, the judgments, we've lost everything. Mom is living in a one-bedroom apartment. Jonathan's in the hospital with heart problems. I'm working at Best Buy trying to pay off the debt. Please, you have to stop this." "I don't have to do anything. We're family." "No." I stood, smoothing down my gown. "We were never family. You made that very clear for 16 years. Every time you knocked my glasses off my face, every time you called me ugly, stupid, worthless, every time you stole my work and claimed it as yours, you taught me that family is just a word people use to excuse abuse." "I was a kid. Kids are cruel. I didn't know." "You were still stealing from me when you were 22, I interrupted. "You launched a company on my work, took credit for my algorithms, and tried to erase me from existence. That wasn't childish cruelty. That was calculated theft." "I'm sorry." He was crying now, ugly sobs that made his face red and splotchy. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I was jealous of you, okay? You were smarter than me, more talented, and I hated it. I hated that you made everything look easy. So I hurt you because it made me feel powerful, but I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." An apology. Finally, after 2 lifetimes, an apology. It meant nothing. "I don't accept your apology," I said calmly. "And I don't forgive you. What you did to me in my first life," I stopped, caught myself. "He didn't know about the rebirth, about the death he'd helped cause. What you did to me shaped who I am, and who I am is someone who doesn't give second chances to people who tried to destroy her." "First life? What are you, Security will escort you out. If you come near me again, I'll file for a restraining order. If you contact me again, I'll consider it harassment and add it to the pile of legal actions against you. Stay away from me, Marcus. You don't get to be part of my story anymore." I walked out, leaving him sobbing in that small room. My heels clicked against the marble as I returned to my party, to my celebration, to my life. The rest of the evening was perfect. I gave a speech about the future of AI, about building technology that serves humanity, about the importance of recognizing and crediting the people who do the real work. Several people told me I was inspiring. A reporter from Forbes asked for an exclusive interview, and when I looked out over the ballroom full of brilliant, successful people, my peers, my employees, my investors, my friends, I realized something profound. I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. Not the manic happiness of revenge, but the deep, peaceful happiness of someone who had fought for herself and won. The little girl with the ugly glasses didn't exist anymore. She died in more ways than one. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who had built an empire on her own terms, who had taken back everything that had been stolen from her and transformed it into something magnificent. Marcus had called my glasses ugly, had used them as a weapon to make me feel small and worthless and invisible. And in my first life, I'd believed him. I'd let those glasses and the cruel words attached to them define me. But in this life, I'd taken them off. Not because he was right, but because I was done letting him control any part of my narrative. I'd gotten LASIK not to make myself prettier, but to see clearly, to see myself clearly, without the distortion of his hatred. And what I saw was someone powerful, someone brilliant, someone who had turned pain into purpose and victimhood into victory. The Forbes article came out 2 weeks later. It was a 10-page spread with professional photos, me in my office, me in the server room examining our custom hardware, me at MIT giving a guest lecture. I looked polished and confident, my eyes bright and clear without any glasses to hide behind. The article detailed my journey from scholarship student to billionaire entrepreneur. It mentioned that I'd grown up in a complicated family situation and that I'd legally separated from my stepfamily after high school. It noted that I held more patents than any other woman under 30. It quoted MIT professors who called me once in a generation and investors who said I was redefining the possible. I mailed a copy to my mother's new apartment. She called me the next day. "Sophia, I read the article. You look successful, happy." "I am." A long pause. "I'm sorry for not protecting you, for choosing him over you, for not seeing what they were doing until it was too late. Too little, too late." But something in me softened slightly. She had been a victim too, in her way. Grief and desperation had made her weak, and Margaret had exploited that weakness. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully, "but I'm not ready to have you in my life. Maybe someday, not now." "I understand." Her voice was thick with tears. "I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to say that, but I am. Your father would be proud too." My father. I'd barely thought about him in years, too focused on surviving than thriving. But she was right. My father, who had encouraged my love of technology, who had called me his little genius. He would have been proud. "Thank you," I whispered. Then I hung up before the emotion could overwhelm me. 6 months after the party, Marcus made one last attempt to contact me. An email to my personal account. He must have gotten it from someone because I'd never given it to him. The subject line was, "I understand now." Despite my better judgment, I opened it. "Sophia, I've been in therapy for 3 months. Court-ordered because apparently bankruptcy and public humiliation weren't enough. I also had a breakdown and got involuntarily committed for a week." Fun times. Anyway, my therapist made me do this exercise where I had to list every cruel thing I did to you. Not just the big stuff, like stealing your algorithms. All of it. Every name I called you. Every time I broke your glasses. Every time I copied your homework and blamed you for cheating. Every time I deleted your files or ate your food or accidentally ruined your things. It took 3 sessions to get through the whole list, and when we were done, my therapist asked me why. Why did I do all of that to someone who never hurt me, who was just a kid trying to survive? I didn't have a good answer. Said I was jealous, which is true. I said you made me feel stupid, which is also true, but not your fault. I said mom encouraged it, which is true, but doesn't excuse my choices. But the real answer, the one I've been avoiding for 23 years, is that hurting you made me feel powerful. You were smarter, kinder, more talented than I'd ever be, and I couldn't stand it. So I tried to destroy you instead of accepting that you were better than me. I succeeded, kind of. In your first life, you said? I don't know what you meant by that, but I know I destroyed something in you. And then you came back, metaphorically or literally, I'm still not sure. And you became this unstoppable force that crushed me. I deserved it. I deserve worse. I deserve to spend the rest of my life paying for what I did to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for money or help or anything else. I know you owe me nothing. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I took from you. I understand that the glasses were never ugly. I just needed you to believe you were ugly so I could feel superior. I understand that every cruel word, every theft, every moment of humiliation was a choice I made to hurt you. And I understand that you not only survived it, but you thrived despite it. You built an empire on the very things I tried to steal from you. You became everything I pretended to be. I hope you never think about me again. I hope you're so successful and happy and fulfilled that the memory of me fades into nothing. That would be the best revenge. Not destroying me, but becoming so magnificent that I'm irrelevant. You always deserved better than us. I'm sorry it took me losing everything to see that. Marcus, I read the email 3 times, waiting to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. He was right. The best revenge wasn't destroying him. It was becoming so successful that he became irrelevant. And I had. Chen Sophia Technologies was growing exponentially. I was being invited to speak at conferences, to advise government committees, to sit on boards. My life was full and rich and meaningful. Marcus was just a bad memory from a past I'd outgrown. I didn't respond to his email, but I also didn't block him. I simply archived it and moved on with my day, which included a meeting with the CEO of Google about a potential acquisition offer, which I'd decline, I wasn't ready to sell, lunch with my girlfriend Sarah, a brilliant engineer I'd met at a conference, and an evening lecture at MIT where I'd announce a new scholarship program for underprivileged students studying computer science. My life was too full for revenge. It was too full for anger. It was too full for Marcus Chen. 3 years later, Chen Sophia Technologies went public. The IPO was the largest tech offering of the year, valuing the company at $42 billion. My personal net worth hit $15 billion overnight, making me the 14th richest self-made woman in the world. The day of the IPO, I stood on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, surrounded by my team, the brilliant engineers and designers and salespeople who had helped build this empire, and rang the opening bell. The sound echoed through the building, a declaration of victory so complete it still didn't feel real. I thought about the girl I'd been in my first life, the victim who'd swallowed pills because she couldn't see any other way out, the girl who'd died believing she was worthless, ugly, a failure. I thought about the girl I'd been in my second life. 7 years old, staring in the mirror at her thick glasses, knowing exactly what was coming but determined to change it. I thought about every step of the journey, the secret coding sessions, the hidden money, the careful documentation, the patient planning, the LASIK surgery that had changed more than just my vision, the lawsuits that had taken back what was mine, the company that had proved my worth to the world. And I thought about Marcus, somewhere in the city, probably watching the IPO on television from whatever cramped apartment he was living in now, watching the girl with the ugly glasses ring the opening bell as a billionaire entrepreneur. I hoped he saw it. I hoped it hurt. And then I hoped I'd never think about him again. Because that was the real power of rebirth, not just the ability to change the past, but the ability to build a future so bright that the past became irrelevant. 5 years after the IPO, I bought a house in the Hamptons, 20,000 square feet right on the ocean with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private beach. It cost $80 million, which was obscene, but I could afford obscene. I furnished it carefully, filling it with art and books and comfortable furniture. I installed a state-of-the-art home office where I could work remotely. I built a greenhouse for the garden I'd never had time to maintain but had always dreamed of starting. And in the master bedroom, in a frame on the wall, I hung my old glasses. Not as a trophy, not as a symbol of triumph over Marcus, but as a reminder. Those glasses represented the girl who'd survived. The girl who'd been told she was ugly and worthless and invisible, who'd believed it for too long, who'd died believing it. But they also represented the girl who'd come back, who'd fought, who'd won. I didn't need them anymore. I could see perfectly, literally and metaphorically. But I kept them anyway, a memorial to the person I'd been, and a reminder of the person I'd become. Sometimes, late at night, I'd look at them and remember Marcus's voice. Why does she wear those ugly glasses? And I'd smile because the answer was simple. She doesn't anymore. She got contacts, LASIK, a billion-dollar company, and a life so extraordinary that ugly boys with small minds became nothing but dust in her rearview mirror. She survived. She thrived. She won. And he never saw her eyes again. Not the real her, not the powerful her, not the magnificent her. That was his loss, not hers. The final piece of the story came 10 years after my rebirth. I was 33, running a tech empire worth over $100 billion with ventures in AI, quantum computing, biotech, and space exploration. Chen Sophia Technologies had become one of the most innovative and valuable companies in the world, and I'd personally been credited with breakthroughs that were reshaping entire industries. I'd also gotten married to Sarah, the engineer I'd met years ago, who was brilliant and kind and saw me for exactly who I was. We'd adopted 2 children, both girls, both former foster kids who'd been overlooked by other families. I was determined to give them the childhood I'd never had, full of support, encouragement, and unconditional love. My life was perfect, genuinely, improbably perfect. And then I got a letter from Jonathan Chen. He was dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, terminal, maybe 3 months left. He wanted to see me before he died, to apologize, to make amends. I almost threw the letter away, but something made me hesitate. Maybe curiosity, maybe a desire for final closure. I went to see him at the hospice facility where he was spending his final days. Margaret was there, looking older and harder than I remembered. Marcus was there too, still working retail, still paying off debt, still living with the consequences of his choices. Jonathan looked skeletal. The vibrant, successful businessman who'd charmed my mother 30 years ago was gone, replaced by a hollow shell in a hospital bed. Sophia, his voice was weak. You came. I'm not staying long. I understand. He coughed, wincing. I wanted to apologize for everything. For what I did, what I allowed Marcus to do. For stealing your work. For failing to protect you. Why? I asked flatly. Why did you do it? You were already successful. You didn't need to steal from a kid. He closed his eyes. Pride, fear. When I saw how talented you were, how much smarter than Marcus, I panicked. I'd always told myself Marcus would take over the business, that he'd be successful, that he'd make me proud, but Marcus was mediocre. And you were extraordinary. It threatened everything I'd built my identity on. So you stole from me to prop up your son. Yes. And I destroyed you both in the process. Marcus never learned to work for anything because I kept handing him stolen success. And you? He opened his eyes, looking at me with genuine remorse. You could have been great even without the rebirth. But we made you into a weapon instead of just letting you be brilliant. I froze. What did you say? The rebirth. He smiled weakly. You think I didn't notice? The 7-year-old who suddenly knew how to code, who understood advanced mathematics, who started documenting abuse before it even happened? You came back different, Sophia. I never understood how, but I knew something had changed. My heart was pounding. In 10 years, no one had ever guessed. I had been so careful. I don't know what you're talking about, I said carefully. It doesn't matter now. He coughed again. Whatever happened, whatever gave you that second chance, you used it well. You built something magnificent. And you made us pay for what we did. Fair is fair. I stared at him, this dying man who'd tormented me, who'd stolen from me, who'd enabled his son's cruelty for years. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a distant clinical observation that he was getting exactly what he deserved. I don't forgive you, I said. I won't pretend this deathbed apology makes up for 30 years of abuse and theft. I know. But I don't hate you either. You're just irrelevant. You and Margaret and Marcus, you're all irrelevant to my life now. You've been irrelevant for years. He nodded slowly. That's worse than hatred, isn't it? Being irrelevant. Yes, I agreed, and it is. I left without saying goodbye. Margaret tried to stop me in the hallway, demanding money for Jonathan's care, insisting I owed them something. I walked past her without responding. Marcus called after me, his voice echoing in the sterile corridor, but I didn't turn around. I had nothing left to say to any of them. Jonathan died 3 weeks later. I didn't go to the funeral. I sent a formal condolence card to my mother. We'd been slowly rebuilding our relationship over the years, though it would never be what it could have been, and I moved on with my life. On my 35th birthday, I threw a party at my Hamptons house. Not a corporate event this time, but an intimate gathering of people I actually loved. Sarah, our kids, my close friends, a few MIT professors who'd mentored me, the core team from Chen Sophia Technologies who'd become like family. We ate dinner on the beach as the sun set, the children playing in the sand, the adults talking and laughing. At some point, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. "To Sophia," she said warmly, "the most brilliant, resilient, magnificent person I know. You've built an empire, changed the world, and somehow still find time to be an amazing partner and mother. We're lucky to know you." Everyone cheered. I felt my eyes sting with sudden tears, happy tears, grateful tears, the tears of someone who'd fought through hell and found heaven on the other side. Later, after everyone had left and the kids were asleep, Sarah and I walked along the beach. The moon was full, reflecting off the water, and the sound of the waves was soothing. "Do you ever think about them?" Sarah asked quietly. She knew the whole story, not about the rebirth, but about the abuse, the theft, the revenge. "The Chens?" "Not really," I said honestly. "Sometimes I'll see something that reminds me, a pair of thick glasses, a news article about patent theft, and I'll remember for a moment. But they don't haunt me. They're just a story I tell myself about who I used to be. The girl with the ugly glasses. The girl who survived." I stopped walking and turned to face the ocean. "You know what's funny? Marcus spent so much time trying to make me believe I was ugly, worthless, invisible. And for a long time, I believed him. But the ugly glasses were never the problem. The problem was that I let his cruelty define my worth. And now? Now I know that worth isn't something other people can give or take away. It's inherent. I was always brilliant. I was always valuable. I just needed to survive long enough to prove it. To myself, not to them." Sarah squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you survived. Both times." I laughed, though I'd never told her about the rebirth. "Both times?" "You know what I mean. The girl who was abused and the woman who fought back. They're both survivors." She was right, the 7-year-old who'd opened her eyes in a familiar bedroom with impossible memories, and the 23-year-old who'd swallowed pills in despair. They were both survivors. They'd both fought to exist, to matter, to be seen. And the 35-year-old standing on this beach, running a $100 billion empire, married to a woman she loved, raising children she adored, living a life beyond anything she'd dared to dream, she was a survivor too. The story of the ugly glasses had ended. In its place was a new story, one where a brilliant woman built something extraordinary and lived happily ever after. Not because a man validated her, not because her abusers apologized, but because she validated herself. She saved herself. She became her own hero. And that, in the end, was the best revenge of all.